We need to do some revision because we've had a little bit of a gap and it's difficult to remember everything after a period like that. So let's go back to the beginning. The Mishnah began with a scenario. What's the scenario?
There was a Tallis involved.
There's a Tallis. There's
Found it and it's mine.
correct. Shnaim, Ochazin, Tallis. There are two people. And they are still attached to this Tallis. That's the interesting thing. No matter what happened, no matter how they got there, there are two people attached to this Tallis, and it appears that they, while attached to this Tallis, land up in the court. So there's two guys. Imagine the scene. They like walk into the court, both holding onto this Tallis, which is any kind of a cloak, and each one is claiming it as theirs. Okay, so we said that there are. What are the two claims? No, what are the claims that they make? The words that they say. What do they say? So one person says, "I found it." The other person says, "I found it." The other one person says, "It's all mine." The other person says, "It's all mine." So then, what do the courts do according to the Mishnah?
He has to swear that
Correct.
no less than half says.
Exactly. Each of them has to take the same oath, which is that they swear that no less than half of the garment belongs to them. Once they've made that oath, then we split the garment, which we already learned. Doesn't mean you don't rip it down the middle. You sell it and you split the proceeds. Okay, great. So that was scenario 1 in the Mishnah. What was scenario 2 in the Mishnah?
Is that where the one says less than a quarter, has to swear that less than a quarter?
Correct. So how did they land up there? How did they land up? I'm saying, how did they land up in that situation? What were their claims? So again, it's two guys holding on to a Tallis, but the claims are different. So in the second scenario, what are their claims?
One guy claims it's his. It's all
Correct.
his. The other guy claims not at least half of it.
Correct. Exactly. So the one person says it's all mine, and the other person says half is mine, which is effectively saying that somehow or other we both landed up with this Tallis at the same time. And there the ruling is, as you said, the ruling is this person has to swear that no less than 3/4 is his. This person has to swear that no less than 1/4 is his, and then we divide accordingly. Okay, great. Third scenario.
Horse, that donkey, is it donkey?
Doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter what animal it is.
Somebody leading the
Correct. So you got one person riding the animal, one person leading the animal, or alternatively, you had two people leading the animal. And what do we say? Each one's claiming the animal as theirs. They each have to swear, and then we're going to split accordingly. And we said that the innovation of this is to let us know that the concept that riding an animal is a form of taking possession of an animal, and leading an animal is a form of taking possession of an animal. So that's why we needed this case. And then the fourth scenario in the Mishnah was?
They agree.
Everybody, yeah. Okay, so two possibilities. Either the possibility gives us clarity. So either we have clarity because there are witnesses, and the witnesses say we know exactly what happened, and then of course you just take them at their word and you don't put anybody through the process of taking an oath, or the two parties acknowledge, listen, it's a strange story, but it's what happened. We landed up both picking this thing up at the same time, and therefore we have equal claim to it. So then obviously we'll just divide the Tallis accordingly without anybody having to take an oath. Okay, great.
Question.
Yes.
There's a cloak, and you found the cloak because we're at a corner, and I found it on the other corner, and we both grabbed it. How do you claim half or a quarter, or should you claim it's mine?
Yeah, well, it depends how honest you are in that scenario. So if two people, where you see this a lot is in those baseball games. And then
over the edge.
and then the person in the one of the spectators catches the ball. So there's cameras, there's everything. We know exactly who caught the ball, and yet you still get people who come along and try and wrest it out of their hands. You see it. See those things happen. So there's a degree of honesty that comes into play over here. It could well be that there really are two people who somehow in a strange twist of fate landed up picking up this random garments on the side of the road from two sides simultaneously. Now it's just a question of their honesty. And that's why we put them through the oath, because the oath is supposed to be a test of honesty. So the most likely scenario is that the person's going to say, listen, I picked it up. Like, if you're caught up in trying to get something, the likelihood of noticing that there's somebody else in the same space doing the same thing is very low. So when a person says, it's all mine, that's what they truly believe. They don't have that objectivity. It's like when whenever you ask people about a little bumper bashing, there's no question it's the other person's fault. It's always like that. Or they'll use something I didn't see. I didn't see the car, I didn't see the pole, I didn't see the whatever. Because it's very difficult for people to see objectively what's happened to them. That's how you land up in these scenarios. Okay. So then the Gemorah had a question. The Gemorah's question was, why is it necessary to tell me these two scenarios? That the one person says, I found it, the other person says, I found it, one person says it's all mine, the other person says it's all mine. Why was it necessary to have it that way? So the question was, why is it necessary to have both statements that the person says, I found it, and the person says, I found it, the person says it's all mine, the person says it's all mine. Okay? So we said the first explanation was, actually that is exactly what's happening. Each person is saying, I found it, and therefore it's all mine. That's actually what they're saying. That was our first suggestion. Okay? In other words, at that point, we still believed that this was a single case. The first scenario in the Mishnah was a single case. And just the Mishnah packaged their wording in two separate segments, but it was actually their wording. The only thing is, we said, well, if that's the case, why do you have to say, it's all mine? Just say, I found it. And that led us into that whole conversation around how people could misconstrue the meaning of the word find. That's where we got into this conversation about, well, maybe when the person said, I found it, they meant I saw it. And so they had to clarify what they meant. And they had to say, when I said I found it, I meant it's all mine. That's basically where we went with that. And then we said, well, hang on a second. Nobody ever imagines that claiming you saw something is in fact a claim. There's a clear verse in the Torah. The Torah says in Mitzasa. Mitzasa means that it's you've actually got it in your hand. There's no way that this could happen. And then the Gemorah made a very important distinction. And that's the distinction between the way in which the Torah speaks and the way in which people speak. Because the Torah obviously is a letter-perfect document. So whatever the Torah says is 100% accurate. Whereas the way that people speak colloquially. And it's not unlikely that a person will say, I found it, when really what happened is they saw it first. But in their mind, and again, remember how people are, there's an expression in the Gemorah that Adam karov etzel atzmoi, that a person is very close to themselves. And it's a play on words because the word karov is a relative. And halachically, a relative can never testify on your behalf. They can't testify against you either. A relative cannot testify regarding a relative. So when we say Adam Karov Eitzel Atzma, the person is a relative of themselves, that means the person can never testify for themselves. Because the degree of dissonance or the degree of bias, depending on the circumstances, is so ingrained and so deep that they can't contextualize what's going on. So it's very likely that a person will actually say, I found it, when what really happened is they saw it first.
Please define a relative. How close is that?
You're saying not to be able to testify?
Yes.
It's immediate relatives. So it just, I don't want to get overly technical, but it is immediate relatives. There is a whole discussion about relatives through marriage, whether or not they can testify. And when we say immediate, we go as far as even cousins can't be part of the testimony against each other.
If it was, if we had left it to say, I saw it, what would the implication of that be?
So if the Mishnah had only said us the words I saw
it was referring, it had to qualify it, otherwise you would think that I saw it.
Right.
Is it therefore I saw it and therefore you got ownership on it?
So that's what we'd think. Because remember, when we read the Mishnah, here's what's so important about this. When we read the Mishnah, we are reading a legal work. Right? It may well describe scenarios, but the purpose of the Mishnah it's not a storybook. The purpose of the Mishnah is to be a legal book. And it's a legal book that is word perfect. So when we refer to the Torah, we call the Torah letter perfect. When we refer to the Mishnah, we call it word perfect. That means that every word in the Mishnah has legal overtones. Okay? So the authors of the Mishnah would have written whatever it is that they wrote. They would have written it consciously, knowing that you are going to extrapolate legal information out of this. So now I'm the author of the Mishnah, right? And I've got this responsibility on my shoulders. I've got to make sure that whatever I present is sound, that everybody gets the right halachic perspective. And now I say, the word is, I found it. Leave out the other part, that it's all mine. Now I've got to anticipate, when you read that, how are you going to interpret I found it? Will you know what the legal parameters of finding are? Or will you just assume that you know what those parameters are? So according to this argument, that's why the Mishnah has to add the words kula, sheli, it's all mine, to ring fence the legal term finding, because the reader might get it wrong. So we don't care about the fictional person we're discussing in the scenario, because the fictional person will say what the courts tell him to say, or what they push him to see if he will say. We're not worried about that. We're worried about what is the legal precedent, what is the legal parameters of this of this conversation. Make sense?
No. If you take the original scenario, two people, Tallis, and they just said, I found it.
Yes.
Then what would the ruling be? Or could there not be a ruling?
Okay, so you're asking a different question. So you're saying now practically two guys...
What's the implication?
Okay, fine. So two guys walk into the good point. So two guys walk into the base, and this guy says, I found it. This guy says, I found it. Okay? The court says at this point, neither of you has the rights to either of it because of the way that this mission has been written. So just because you claim that you found it doesn't mean a thing. You have to... And they're not going to say, is it yours? Do you believe it to be yours? Because that's obviously leading the witness. Well, in this case, the litigant. Because we're not cross-examining witnesses at this point. But we would have to ask questions that would expose whether or not they believe they have legal claim to it, or whether they're just taking a chance and saying, I found it. But if their only claim is I found it, would say, well, sorry, that's not a good enough claim. And we're actually going to hold this Tallis.
No one can take.
Correct. We'll store it until somebody can clarify who it belongs to. Okay. Then the Mishnah said, okay, well then leave out the words I found it. Sorry, the Gemorah asked, leave out the words I found it. Just say, this guy said kula sheli, it's all mine, and that guy said kula sheli, it's all mine. And the Gemorah gave a very simple answer to that, which is, well then you've done no favors, because now we have no working definition of what finding is legally. So you had to include the word finding so that you'd have that legal term that you could apply elsewhere. Okay, so that was the whole first approach to the Gemorah, which is that it's actually one scenario, and in that one scenario, both parties are saying, I found it, and therefore it's mine. Now, where we left off last time is we introduced the possibility, we haven't really unpacked it fully, we introduced that there is another whole different perspective on this Mishnah. Now, bear in mind that these two perspectives are not at loggerheads. They're two different perspectives, and that each one is giving us a layer. The Mishnah is a layered document. So each one is giving us a greater depth of our understanding of the Mishnah. So the second approach says, you know what? The word metzia is a very specific word. It refers to when you find something. Now, under what circumstances can you find something? In other words, I don't know if anybody here has family members who do this, but there are some families where siblings or sometimes children go shopping in their siblings' cupboards or their parents' cupboards, And the next thing you see this kid walk out wearing an outfit, it's like, that looks familiar. That kind of thing, right? So can you use the expression legally in halacha? Can you use the expression, I found something in my own house? And it's not I found what I was looking for, like I lost something and I found it. I'm not talking about that. Can I say?
I'd say not.
You'd say not, right?
But there's no owner. You find it in the
Okay, so what's the definition of finding? The definition of finding is a scenario where the object is currently ownerless. It may previously have had an owner. So can that happen in my house? Can't happen. By definition, can't happen inside my house.
No,
Anything's...
only if you have the parking in your house, lots of people came and left something.
Exactly. But if somebody leaves something in your house, it's still theirs.
But you don't
They
know.
just-
It's unidentifiable.
Well, you know who's been in your house.
Yeah, but you don't know whose it is.
But you now have the responsibility to track them down.
Yes.
That's not ownerless. That's just you haven't connected the dots.
But to find something, it needs to be ownerless.
It needs to be currently ownerless. Now, later on, much later on in chapter 3, we're going to revisit that whole discussion about at which point does something become ownerless. So we don't have that information yet at this point. But because it's all the way in chapter 3, it's worth having the conversation now. Even though chapter 3 will go into so much detail, it's worth having the conversation now. So there are a few considerations of how something could be ownerless. Number one, it can't be in private property. By definition, something cannot be ownerless in private property. I'll explain to you what I mean. Let's say that there's a promotion and they're giving away we don't even have to think of promotion. You get the Santon Chronicle? Yeah? Is it yours? By what virtue is it yours? Have you paid for it?
Through my driver.
Correct. So once it's in private property, it now has an owner. That's how it works. So you can't, by definition, you cannot have something which is ownerless in private property. Because my property, it's a concept that we'll discuss later on in the Gemorah, my property has the ability to acquire something on my behalf. Obviously I can't acquire something that belongs to somebody else. But if something has no owner and then it lands up in my property, it's now mine. So it can't be ownerless by definition. So the first indication that something is ownerless is that it will be in a public environment. Second of all, so let's say that you dropped your wallet on the street. Is it now ownerless? Because it's in a public space?
No.
No, that'd be ridiculous, right? That'd be ridiculous. So why is the wallet not ownerless?
Because you got your cards or your name or all that's traceable.
And therefore,
Traceable.
and therefore,
Yours.
I agree with all of that.
You can return it.
And therefore, and therefore,
return it.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
You know, it
Just to go,
belongs to somebody else.
and therefore,
You must return.
and therefore,
Fine.
It belongs to
Obligated
the
to
person who's
Can't turn a blind eye.
and therefore, I still believe it's mine. You know, that if I believe it's traceable, and if I believe that hopefully there's a decent human being out there who will use the information in my wallet to trace it back to me, then I still believe it's mine, which means I have not yet relinquished
Well, you're hopeful.
my ownership. That's fine. I could be hopeful. That's okay. But I have not yet relinquished ownership of it. Now let's use a different scenario. Let's say that a person was sitting in the garden and randomly this fish eagle swoops down, grabs the wallet in its talons, and flies off. Now, do you expect to get your wallet back? Much, much, much less chance, right? Or let's use an even more extreme example. Let's say you're sitting in your garden and you've got your wallet on the table, or your phone, which is a more likely scenario. You've got your phone on the table. And of course you can track your phone because it's got numbers and blah, blah, blah. It's like one of the easiest things to track is a phone. And the next thing, out of nowhere, this tornado rips through the neighborhood and whips up your phone. What are the chances that you'll expect it back?
Slim.
You don't believe that it will survive, let alone that it will land somewhere where there's a decent human, etc. Right? So it becomes this whole scale of probabilities, really, where if we anticipate that a person believes they'll get their object back, they are still technically the owners of it. So in order for something to be ownerless, either it's got to be a radical scenario where the person can never trace it back and therefore never expects it back, or it's got to be something that had no owner in the first place. So, like, for example, just outside the property here, there's this plum tree. It's on the street. It's ownerless. So anybody can walk past and can pick plums. And nobody can have any legal claim against them because it is fundamentally ownerless. So how would a garment become ownerless? It's basically, as you can well imagine, in those days, probably everybody had very similar looking garments, and it got dropped in the street, and the person won't be able to identify that it's mine. So at that point, it becomes ownerless, and therefore people could say that they found it. So that's the scenario that is represented by the words ani metzaseh. It means I found something that has no current owner, and therefore I'm claiming ownership over it. Kula shali, however, the Gemorah in this new perspective is saying, Kula shali means I acquired this object. It's a whole different scenario. It's two people debating who acquired an object first. Now, let's try and work that out. The Gemorah later will unpack the scenario a little bit more. Let's just try to work out how that could have happened. How is it possible that two people could believe that they both bought an object?
well, there's a contract.
Okay, well, then how can you have confusion?
No, I'm saying, yeah, well, okay.
When you go to the
So
shops, there's no
is it
contract.
how it-
I'm saying when you go to the shops, there's no
Is
contract.
it
You gotta
simultaneously your scenario?
There is a contract.
Well,
You
it
gotta
has to
select-
be.
I mean,
No, it does
but
not
just
have to
on
be.
a seller.
No,
You gotta
it does
select.
not have to be. It does not have to be simultaneous. It does not have to be simultaneous. When you find it, it has to be simultaneous because the moment of the finding is when you acquire it. So they both have to happen at the same time. Whereas when you're purchasing something, there are multiple points where the acquisition could take place. So it doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely.
Offer and acceptance.
Okay, good, exactly. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
right. So there you go. But let's think how life was in those days, because those are obviously the scenarios that they're talking about. And then the likelihood is that it is a shopkeeper and customers. How do you land up with two customers, each believing they got this item from the same shop, and each guy saying, "I'm the one who got it"? How do you think that could happen?
Well, it could be two items.
No, it's a single item.
Two tellers.
Single item. Two
Tellers and one item left in stock.
Two tellers is a good example. So how does each person land up believing that they are the one who got it?
With one item left.
There was one item left in stock, so let's develop the thought. And you can get rid of the second teller. Can be one seller, and you can still. So
They
there's
both come in and they say, "Do you have this book?" And
Right.
Both tellers say, "Yes, we do."
right,
Acquired it yet.
but no one's acquired anything.
Will they pay for it?
No one's acquired.
To acquire it.
Okay, so let's make it a radical scenario, as the Gemorah will. The radical scenario is they're haggling with the seller over the item, and it may be the last item, and that's why they're haggling, or it might just be that's the way they do business in that part of the world, right? And they're both haggling over the item, and at the end of it, they both chuck the money down on the counter, grab the item, and he's bamboozled. The shop owner's bamboozled, and he has no idea who actually was the rightful purchaser. And now they'll end up walking into the court. So that's one scenario. There might be others, but that's kind of the scenario we're going to work with. It is an extreme scenario, but that kind of extreme scenario really could happen.
But it would have to happen at exactly the same time.
Well, they're both not exactly the
No,
same
they have
time,
to have one
within
item left.
within reasonable
You could
time.
say
No, because-
it's 50, and they both put 50 on the table.
But
Correct.
again, he hasn't accepted the money yet.
Yeah, but they've
Offered-
they've
on his
both
table.
they both grabbed the book, so they're both on equal footing. That's the point. And he's not now. He doesn't want anything to do with this. He's not going to fight and say, "Oh, you take your money back." There's no- You go to the court.
Who's going to give me 60?
You go to the court, and if you and if you think about it, the shop owner, I mean, honesty is one thing, but if he wants to make a buck, he's going to keep stum because he's not got double the money. So, it's not even in his interest to adjudicate this process. You go to the courts.
I'll take half your money.
Okay, so that's what the Gemorah is saying at this point. So I want to go back to that because it's the beginning of the section that we're in, and then we're going to get to the part we haven't yet done. So that puts us on page 7 in the notes. Have you got? Yeah.
Downstairs, let me grab the temporary one.
So it's page 7. We should have done this already. I'm just double checking that.
You see page numbers.
Right at the bottom. It's the one with a staple, the section that's got the staple. And then it's the second page of the stapled section, which is page 7. Oh, sorry. We actually need to go back to page 6. I'm sorry, so we have to just catch up a little bit. Let's go back to page 6 for a second.
Please can I see that page?
Do you have it? You may not have
I don't
it.
have it.
Okay, so there you go.
Thank you.
Didn't I just give it to you, Charlie?
Pass it down. Okay,
Ah.
sorry.
Okay, there you go.
Not so good at any clarity.
You're right, I've got a page number.
Okay, yeah. I guess I should look around the table and then decide how big the page numbers need to be. Well, Yaakov is our saving grace. Okay, so I just want to go to the green part. Okay. I mean, let's just do the whole page. Why not? I mean, we've done this part already in the last lesson, but it's fine. We'll do a little. Okay. Do you see that? Umi matzis amras. I don't know if you recall this, but this is a key term that is used in Gemorah. Umi matzis amras is always attached to the word vaha. That's why you'll see that they're both highlighted over here in red. And it's constructing a kashya, which is a what?
Challenge.
A challenge, exactly. And the nature of this challenge is, how could you say X when I have evidence to the contrary? Okay? So, how could you suggest that the Mishnah is really telling us one scenario? And that one scenario is that each of the people is saying, I found it and it's mine. Verha, but ze v'zeh katani. Remember, the Mishnah is word perfect. And the fact that the Mishnah said, this one said I found it, and this one said I found it. Then the Mishnah says, this one says it's all mine, and this one says it's all mine. That expression, zeh v'zeh, is deliberate. And that sounds like it's splitting it into two cases. So how can you argue that it's one case and for whatever reason the Mishnah is splitting the argument of the two parties into two segments? That's not how Mishnah operates. The Mishnah is very concise and very succinct and always wants to keep things as tight as possible. This is messy. Unless, okay, and then it spells it out. Right? It just spells it all out. Unless it's actually two scenarios. And that's this answer the Gemara is going to present here. So, Omer Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, Be'i Tema Rav Simin Bar Ashi, or another opinion is that it wasn't Rav Papa, it was this other sage, Rav Simin Bar Ashi. Ve Amri La, and there's a third variation that says, Kedi, that this was stated anonymously, we don't attribute it to a specific person. But whichever version you go with, Reisha b'metzia, v'seifa b'mikach memkar. Okay, so let's unpack that. Reisha. Let's take that word, Reisha. First, correct. Right, the first part of the Mishnah, or in this case, the first case, b'metzia, is a case of metzia. What's metzia? Finding. So the first scenario that the Mishnah was talking about is where two people found the tallis that was currently ownerless, and now they're debating who found it first. Fine. Seifa, and the latter example, or the second scenario, Seifa comes from the word soif, which means the end. So the end of this particular section, be mekach or memkar, is talking about a case of buying and selling. In other words, it's a case of a transaction, a case of a purchase. Okay.
The second part, which is the latter part.
Kula sheli and kula sheli.
It's mine.
Because now that's how we're doing it now. We're dividing it into two cases. We're saying, I found it, that's talking about people who found it. But where it says, kula sheli, that this one says it's all mine, this one says all mine, that's talking about where they actually bought it. That's the current answer the Gemara is offering. That's as far as we got last time.
Will they substantiate why they're saying that?
Correct. Okay? We'll only get through the first half of that substantiation now. But we will substantiate. Okay, so before we do that, let's meet another key term that is incredibly useful to know in Gemara, incredibly useful, and that is the word tzricha. You see that on page 7, next to the key icon? Tzricha. So let's first break down what's the root of the word. The root of the word you got at the top in your dictionary. Tzadik, reish, chof. Need. Correct. Tzarich means I need, right? So, tzadik, reish, chof means to need, to require. Okay. So now the Gemara is doing tzricha, and it is necessary. Now, we've already discussed so far, in the Gemara we've learned to date, we have encountered a shaila, we've encountered answers, we've encountered kashyas. We have not yet encountered a proof. Right? Here what we're doing is, we offered an answer. The answer to the question of why it says mitzasia, and kula sheli. The current answer that we're working with is, it's actually two scenarios. That the first scenario is where people found something that had no owner. The second scenario is where they bought it. Now I need to support what I've just said. That's why the little icon over here has this hand underneath the answer icon. So in other words, we're supporting the answer. We're motivating why this has to be the answer. And the key word that tells us this is the word tzricha. In this particular case, it's tzricha, and it is necessary, and it is required. Okay, let's understand what that means. When I look at this Mishnah, what's been bothering us all along about the Mishnah, the part that we've learned so far, is that it actually appeared to have redundancies. You know, the way we first pictured it, these two guys come into the court, they're both tugging on this garment. This guy says, I found it, this guy says, I found it. This guy says, it's mine, this guy says, it's mine. And the way that we address that in the first page of this Gemara is, All of that happened in a single scenario in the Beis Din. The problem with that is it raises a series of redundancies. Why do you say this one says and that one says, and then say again this one says and that one says? Why do you have to say found and say it's all mine, right? Sounds like redundancies. So we're now answering by saying, well, the truth of the matter is that there are two scenarios. One is a scenario of finding, one is a scenario of purchasing. Now, as soon as you hear that, your mind should still be saying redundant. Because surely it doesn't matter how the transaction happened. Surely the issue is the two people debating who was the person who did the transaction. In other words, if I pick up a garment off the floor, that is a transaction. It's not a common transaction because there's no giver, seller, bequeather. It's just lying on the floor. But the fact is, anytime I take ownership of something, that is technically a transaction. So what's the difference if I got the transaction off the floor or if I got the transaction over the counter? What's the difference? The fact is, something changed hands and it became mine. And now I'm fighting with this other guy who says, no, it became mine. So even once we suggest that the first part of the Mishnah is talking about a scenario where they found the Tallis, and the second part of the Mishnah is talking about a scenario where they purchased the Tallis, our mind is still saying redundant. I don't need two scenarios. Just tell me, anytime two people are fighting over who got something, this is how you deal with it. Why does it make a difference how they got it? Does that make sense? Again, I'm a court. I need to adjudicate two people who are claiming the same item. Surely, the way I do that is going to be the same regardless of what the details are. Again, there's certain details that are going to be critical, right? If the one guy says, I saw it first, and the other guy says, I picked it up first, obviously we're going to dismiss the person who says, I saw it first. But if their claims are equal, what's the difference if they're both claiming they bought it or they're both claiming they picked it up off the street?
I mean, what goes in my mind is why such a complicated scenario to illustrate this.
Which one? The purchasing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
good
why
point.
not just separate it into two people appear that they purchased an item?
Good. Perfect. Okay, good.
Okay, you go home now.
So when the Gemorah says Sricha, that both of these cases are necessary to be explained in the Mishnah, the reasoning behind it is going to be psychological. Now we're going to start trying to understand the motivation of each person. Now before we read this, would you agree that people take chances in life?
Yes.
For sure, right? That doesn't make them criminals. It's human nature. Human nature is a person going to take a chance. So, let's say, for example, you're standing in the checkout line at a shop and somebody pushes in front of you. Does that make them a bad person?
Well, in South Africa.
Right? Right?
Doesn't make them a crook, it makes them a trouble.
So it's a good question, right? They in their minds definitely have a justification for why they're doing it. You know, they're not doing it with malicious intent. They're doing it because they believe that their priority is justified enough. So let's use a slightly different example because it will illustrate. You're standing in the security line at an airport. Inevitably, there's somebody who says, my flight is boarding. Inevitably, right? Now, and then inevitably somebody says, so's mine, and that's where the tension builds, right? What goes through the mind of the person who says, my flight is boarding? Are they trying to undermine everybody else in the line? No. They're just trying to look out for their own interests. And that is one of the most basic human psychologies, is that people, because they look out for their own interests, will in their minds excuse somebody else, not, God forbid, doing anything illegal. They're not excusing doing something illegal, but they will excuse somebody else being inconvenienced because of their perceived priority. So the person will push ahead in the line at the security in the airport because in their mind, them getting on the flight is that important that the 100 people behind them deserve to be inconvenienced. And again, they're not bad people. You land up sitting next to them on the plane after that, right? And then they're like all shy and embarrassed and whatever, trying to explain themselves. And you discover they're actually very decent people. So that's what the Gemara is going to do over here. It's going to drill down and try and understand. Now, listen to this carefully. Out of the two scenarios, two people who each find an item versus two people each purchase an item, where is a person more inclined psychologically to excuse their priority?
It's found.
Well, this is what we're going to explore, right? So, in our minds, we immediately say, you can't do that when there's money involved. Surely, if somebody else has paid money, you can't pretend that that's in our minds, right? But the Gemara is going to show us something very interesting about human psychology, that even when there's money involved, people will still believe their priority is valid. But let's first do the scenario that came first. The scenario that came first, two people who claim that they found something. Okay? So there's this tallis on the floor. I grab the tallis, you grab the tallis. From my perspective, I picked it up first. From your perspective, you picked it up first. Or maybe even from my perspective, I know you picked it up first. But I figured, you know what? I'm getting in on the action. Why would I do that? What kind of psychology would go through somebody's mind that they know the other person was just a second earlier than they are and they'd still grab onto it? Let's try work this out. How do they justify that to themselves? I saw it first, correct? What else?
They feel like they deserve it more
Why?
because it's more meaningful to them.
Okay, that's extremely subjective, right? Where a person's going to say that it's more meaningful to me than it is to you because I don't know that. Well, what do you think what's going through a person's mind?
Maybe they lost one just like that.
Okay, maybe.
They recognise that it didn't belong to anyone. And they're taking a bit of a chance. If it didn't belong to anyone.
Okay, good. Let's expand on that. So it didn't belong to anyone, and therefore, let's think about this.
No one's been hurt. We all
The other guy,
gaining.
no one's exactly. Nobody's getting hurt. It's all net positive. So that guy, let's say that the cloak is worth $1,000. That guy is about to, for no good reason, walk out of here $1,000 richer.
Now I understand
What's-
why he says, I don't mind having 25% or 75%.
Exactly, but now you see the psychology. Is it so bad if he only gets $500? It's still net positive.
That's the
That-
science.
But that's human psychology.
But one of the principles we said is there's no dishonesty.
No. We said there's no malice. You see, the human mind works in such a biased way that we could very well tell ourselves no harm to somebody who only stands to gain. Again, when is a criminal? If he invested, if he worked on this, if he paid for it, if he spent time, but he didn't.
There's someone did pay for it.
No, we're not there yet.
Different
Okay?
scenario.
But the scenario over here is
So this is out,
this is
no one's paid.
this is the scenario where they found it. So in the scenario where two people found it, it is absolutely likely that a person will convince themselves, I'm not making them lose. I'm just making them gain less. Right? And it's a real thing. People will really think that way. And I'm sure you've even had this experience to some or another extent.
If the person is broke, he knows that he can only benefit out of the situation, that he can get quarter in the end or whatever he get.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
quarter.
It's worth it.
He's got nothing to lose.
I've got nothing to lose. Neither does the other guy. The other guy also has nothing to lose. You can't lose something you don't yet have.
Yeah, but the other guy found it. And
I know, but you don't yet. You know what I'm saying? In my mind, in my self-justification, I'm saying it's not his yet.
You know that it's
Okay, so let's read that inside. Utsricha. And both scenarios are necessary. De, now in this case, de means because, even though it's just a prefix. De tana metzia, had the Mishnah only told me the scenario of the two people finding it, Hava amina, we've had that expression before.
you would have thought.
I would have thought, I would have said. Correct. Exactly. I would have incorrectly said or thought. Metzia, the case of people finding something. So now, if you look at the top of the dictionary, there's two words that go together. Ramu alei. Ramu alei. Do you see that? Ramu alei. Alei means on him. And Ramu means almost, you can hear it in English almost, they roll onto him. Or in other words, they impose on him. So Ramu alei. So let's go back. Metzia, it's in the case of people finding something. Hu deramu rabbanon shvua alei. That's where the rabbis are going to impose an oath. Remember, taking an oath is serious business. You don't want, as the courts, you don't want to have to administer an oath. Why would you do it when you have no other way of extracting the truth out of people? In other words, if I have the psychology that convinces me that I deserve at least part of the Tallis, that psychology will evaporate the minute they put a Torah in my hands and say, use God's name to swear that you deserve this. So if I only saw the scenario of Metzia in the Mishnah, I think, okay, well, in the case of Metzia, you really needed the rabbis to come down harsh on the guy because there's a good chance he's not being fully honest. He's not being intentionally dishonest, but he's not being fully honest. So why do you need to put the shavua on him? Mishum, you got that in the dictionary there. Mishum means because. Mishum means because. And then you've got do you see that that little Yud Reish Hey there in the dictionary? Yud Reish Hey. Can you think of any very, very common word in Hebrew that comes from that root?
You're right, to go down. No?
That's with the Dalet. Okay? Can you think of an extremely common, that's with an Aleph, an extremely common Hebrew word that comes from this root?
Yeah.
No.
See.
No, those have Alephs. And that's Reish Aleph Hey is the root. You won't believe it. But when I tell you, it's like, got it. Torah. What does Torah mean? What does it mean? What's a morah or moreh? No, like with a hey.
Oh, teacher.
Teacher, instructor. That's the correct word. A melamed is a teacher. A moreh is an instructor. Torah is instruction. The root Yud Reish Hey is to instruct. Okay? Now, Mishum Demorah V'Omar, the person's going to effectively tell themselves, like instruct and say, that they're going to tell themselves. The person's going to tell themselves. Another way of expressing this is to justify, because Moireh, Rashi says, Moireh means Moireh Heter. Moireh Heter means to rule favorably. Okay? So Moireh V'Omar, the person is going to justify to themselves as follows. What's a chaver? Friend. Do you think this guy's his friend? The guy's taking the Tallis from. Do you think it's his friend?
No.
So chaver could also mean my peer, my contemporary. I don't have to have a personal relationship with him. Chavra'i is the Aramaic of saying chaveri, my friend, my colleague, the other guy. Love, nothing, or not, I should say, not. Love is like lo in Hebrew. Not. Midi, anything. Chasar ba will be missing. Chaser means to be missing. In other words, my friend won't lose anything. Again, you can't lose what you don't yet have. Okay. So therefore, Azil, which comes from, as you can see, the root Zayin Yud Lamed, Aramaic for go. Azil, I will go. Azil, I will go. Etpis comes from the root Tof Pei Samach, Tofes, which means to grab. So I will go. Etpis, I'll grab onto the Tallis. Ve'is peleg bahadei, and split the profits with him. Ispeleg comes from the word Pei Lamed Gimel, the root for division. What do you call a?
Literally says profits.
Well, it doesn't say the word profit, but I'll split. I'll split with him the value. Yossi, what is a political party in Israel? Miflaga, from this word peleg, right, to separate. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split with him. That's how the person justifies it to himself. Therefore, to ensure that that's not what he was thinking, we put a shavua on him and see if he still holds the line. Because if he was thinking something like this, the shavua will snap him back into reality. If he honestly believes he picked it up and he's the guy who owns it, he'll be willing to take the oath, because taking an oath is a very serious business. But if it's a case where they're arguing about who purchased the tallis, de leka lemeimar hochi, leka cannot lemeimar to say hochi so. In other words, in the case of when a guy's put money on the table, you can't say he's losing nothing when I take the oath. If he already paid money, he's losing the minute I touch his object. Ema loy. I would think in the case of a purchase, we don't apply the same rule because we don't have the same suspicion. In other words, we don't have to impose an oath because we don't think that somebody would be that malicious to say, oh no, it's actually mine, when you know that you're making somebody else lose money. Now, obviously what we still have to do is spin it the other way. So why did I need then the case of the purchase, which we'll still do next time. But you see where this is going. It's this whole psychological analysis of what does the average person think, or what could the average person think under very lucrative circumstances. And like it or not, that's humanity. You know, people...
So if you know that he bought it, you don't have a...
We're not at the bought case yet.
The point is, it's because you're not sure that he actually bought it.
No, we're not at the bought case yet. This is the finding case. No, we said, however, you would not apply the same rule to the bought case.
Yes.
That's all we've said.
Okay.
We haven't examined the bought
So,
case,
but
the
I'm
purchase
saying
case yet.
If you do know that he bought it,
But your
then you can't have
assumption
an
on people,
argument.
your
Correct.
assumptions on people, is that if they think there's nothing to lose, they might take a chance.
Yes, exactly.
If they
No,
don't-
if there's nothing for the
if
other
there's
person to lose.
nothing-
Because I don't want to be that person who stole,
Sure.
right?
So
So if I can convince myself he's not losing anything, then
But if you know that he
I'll
bought it-
justify grabbing
Yes,
on.
But I'm saying, but if you know he bought it,
Then you assume the person is not
Again,
going to
we're not
take
there
it.
yet.
Correct, but we're not there yet. We're not at the purchase case yet.
Put a pin in it.
We're not at the purchase case yet.